This lesson is for FST, Lesson 1-1 on variables, tables, and graphs. The S in FST stands for statistics, and that is when you collect, organize, analyze, or interpret data. The data that you're collecting are simply pieces of information. If you're only referring to one piece of information, you would refer to that as datum. The thing that you're going to study is simply a characteristic or a variable. Students are used to using variable to describe a letter or something that changes in algebra, but in statistics it's the thing that you're going to be counting, classifying, ordering, or measuring. So for example, if you wanted to know what the different eye colors are that are out there in the world, that would be a variable that you could study. Same thing with height or shoe size, or people's salary or occupation. Keep in mind that with 3 of these examples, you'd be collecting numbers or values, and then with the other 2 you'd be collecting words. So it is possible to find a variable or a characteristic that is numbers or words. Once you've decided what your variable is going to be, the thing that you're going to study, then you need to study it for a certain population. Keep in mind that population doesn't have to be people, but many times it is. A population is a set of all individuals or objects that you want to study. Typically it would be people at a school or in a country, but know that it could also be pets or other things. Usually when you're working with a population, it's going to be too large to get the data for everybody or for everything in the population. So typically what is done is a sample is taken. A sample is simply a smaller subset of whatever that population was. So an example would be here at Edina High School. A subset could be students eating first lunch. So that would be considered a sample because most students do eat lunch in the building, and there's a variety of types of students who would go ahead and be eating first lunch. They could be 10th graders, 11th graders, or 12th graders. A sample of the United States might be all the people in a particular state. You could just look at, for example, Minnesota. Another way that you could come up with a sample from the United States is just people who shop at Target. Or you could look at people who drive more than 10 miles to work. Those could be different samples that you are looking at. One thing to keep in mind when you're working with samples is that you want that sample to be a representative sample. The representative sample simply means that you want the sample to have the same characteristics as the original population. So for example, at EHS, if I only took a sample of the 10th graders, that would obviously exclude some of the population in the high school. There are also juniors and seniors in the building. So if I only took a poll or a sample of 10th graders to refer to everybody, that would not be a proper representative sample. Most of the time when we say that we're taking a sample, we mean representative sample. So keep in mind that sometimes when people say sample, they actually mean this idea. When you're working with data, many times it's organized into tables, and those tables can be categorical or numerical in nature. One of the things that I would encourage students to do when they're working with tables is to not exclude looking at all the words that go with it. Many times the title will give you key information about the data that's there, and students who skip over reading the title lose out on that information. Also make sure that you understand how the data is organized. Sometimes it's organized horizontally, sometimes vertically. Sometimes the information is numerical in nature, and sometimes it's categorical in nature. So it's always a good idea to take a moment to look at the table and just kind of analyze where it came from and how it looks. Going a little bit further as it relates to tables, it's always good to make sure that you ask the question, what is the variable that's being presented and how is it being presented? Is the data that we're looking at, or are the data that we're looking at, trustworthy? Typically there will be a source that's cited. You want to take mention or note of what that source is and make sure that you find it to be a trustworthy source. And then students will be looking at, in the homework, what conclusions they can draw from the table. What does the information tell us and how are we going to use it? For further examples here, students will need to consult their text. There are a few bar graphs mentioned in the homework. One thing I want to point out here is that a bar graph is not a histogram. We will not be learning about bar graphs in this class, but we will be taking an entire lesson to learn about and make histograms. So I just wanted to make the distinction there for now, but know that the students will get more learning on histograms later. One of the main things that's the difference between bar graphs that you can tell just by looking is that bar graphs will have the bars typically separated with a certain amount of space, where histograms typically have the bars right next to each other. So if you're wondering which type you have, if the bars don't have any spaces between them for the most part, it's most likely a histogram. In the homework assignment, there are several questions that assume that students remember how to do a percent. When you're trying to find the percent of something, take the thing that you're trying to study, or the characteristic or the variable, and divide it by the total for that item. You'll get a decimal answer, and then you'll just move the decimal point 2 places to turn it into a percent. So we have 2 homework questions that I want to help students with. It's on reading tables and calculating percentages. So we're going to do 2 quick examples. So let's read the question first. In number 12, it says refer to the table right before example 2. What percent of households in 2005 were headed by people who had some college but not a bachelor's degree? So let's refer back to the table. And this is the table right above example 2. And so some college is right here, and that is represented by the number of households. So there's 28,874 people who have had some college. This table is already given in 2005, and it's the education level of the household. The total number of households is not given, but that is something that we could calculate here from this column. So we're going to add up all the numbers in the column, and then we're going to have that as our total, and the number on the top, the characteristic that we're trying to find, is this number here, so that'll be on the top. So let's go ahead and write that out. So the 28,874 goes on the top, and then on the bottom we had to find the total number of households. So 6088 plus 9130 plus 32,345 plus 28,874 plus 31,153. So I'm going to leave students to finish off the rest of that now that they know how to set it up. Now let's read number 13. That one's going to be calculated a little bit differently from the one above. What percent of households headed by high school grads with no college degree earn at least $25,000 annually? If you look at the title, there's actually several titles in this table. Overall, this is the income level, but some of the table is organized by percent. So we're going to look at high school grads who earn $25,000 or more annually. And these numbers are already given to us in percent form. So at $25,000, high school grads, there's 13.3% of those. Then we'd want to continue to add these percents onto it. So we're going to go ahead and grab all those numbers and add them up. 13.3, 16.7, 18.9, 9.4, and 9.3. So again, I'm going to leave students to add those up on their own, and then just simply put a percent sign at the end. We are using Cornell notes this year, so students are encouraged at another time, not right now, but on another day, either 1 day or 2 days away from now, to go ahead and write questions that relate to what they wrote. And when they're all done, again on a different day, overlook their notes and try to come up with a 3 to 4 sentence summary of their learning.